guest today is Sherell Whitney, and I worked with her when I was living in Broome, Western Australia, and she was based down in Perth. There are lots of things that I admire about Cherelle. You'll learn very quickly that she's jumped around a number of different roles and industries, and this helps her, be very relatable to a wide array of participants. She also has an incredible ability to give everything a crack and go for it, and she loves talking about ideas and possibilities. In this episode, you'll learn how to create a safe training environment, why you only have 3 minutes to create a trusting space with your group, why you need a Mary Poppins bag full of stuff, and the number one nightmare of all facilitators and how to manage it. Show notes and resources for the episode can be found at firsttimefacilitator.com/episode 9. And please let me know what you think about the show. Leave an honest review on iTunes or email me, hello@firsttimefacilitator.com. Now, on to the show. Our guest today believes that being curious to learn keeps us energised and connected throughout our work and our life. She loves ideas, innovative thinking, and what-if questions, and is passionate about lifting people's personal and professional capability to lead and manage. She runs a company called Lift Performance Solutions out of Perth, and her aim as a facilitator is to inspire her participants with real experiences that make learning and fun. Welcome to the show, Sherell Whitney.
Thank you, Leanne, for having me. This is fun already.
It's so much fun. Now, look, Cherelle, our listeners may not know, but we met when I was living in Broome working for TAFE, and we would fly you up every so often to help us out with our leaders and, managers within the TAFE. So I've only really known you as a facilitator. Can you tell us a bit about your career journey and how you wound up, with the position that you're in now?
Yeah, well, actually, where we met in Broome was one of the, best jobs because it was paradise. So it's always nice to come to a gorgeous venue with gorgeous down-to-earth people like you. So I loved that job, but really that was the culmination of probably about 20 years of training and facilitating. So I started my journey in my early 20s as a paralegal in a law firm. So I had no idea that I was going to become a trainer or a facilitator back then. I was just looking for a job where I could earn some money and use my skills. But I was very lucky, and I have continued to be lucky along my journey to have some great mentors. And the guy who ran the law firm in Perth was very big on training and development of his staff. So I quickly became, in a fast-growing law firm, the trainer for about 130 staff and also managing those staff. So I cut my teeth there in training and development, and I learned a lot about team building. And I had a very supportive boss who was keen to expose me to a lot of new tools at a young age. He was also a good mentor as well. So he very much believed in meditating at the start and the end of each day to keep your mind fresh and keep your mindfulness present in your work. Kind of unusual for a lawyer, but it was a great role model for me, and I've taken that through to my facilitation tools and skills, throughout my career, being present and being ready and up with your energy to work the room and the group. After I worked in law for 7 years, I started my first business, which was called Totally Wild, and it was an abseiling business, so completely different to law, but that was my first step into entrepreneurial kind of space. And then I worked in tourism for a few years in a secretarial support area, and I guess that CEO that I worked closely with was very good at creating the bigger picture and the energy around an event. So I learned quite good skills from her about knowing who's in the room as a facilitator and knowing how to build the atmosphere to be safe and fun. And she liked fun and I liked fun. So that kind of worked very well for us. We ran some of the best events in Perth for tourism in that time. After I did that, I started my business as a consultant, and I started off doing database management of all things, which was just bizarre now I look back. But it had an element of connecting people. So I guess back then there was no such thing called a CRM or customer relationship management, but that's what I was doing, is working on the data to make it sense for the customer. And I think that's one of my skill sets as a facilitator, is bringing the agenda, whatever the organisation needs, and the people together so that they feel connected with it. I also started the first internet cafe for people over 55 back in 2000. So I had a vision about old people needing to have some space where they could just train and learn in a positive, comfortable, safe space. And back then, all the internet cafes were full of, young kids who knew how to do it instantly, and old people were feeling a bit isolated. So we started that business in Perth, and again, I used my training skills and facilitation skills to kind of bring a very scary medium, being the internet, to people that were scared of it, older people over 55, 60, 65, and bring the two together so that they could, be more than they perhaps thought possible. And I had some great memories. That business didn't make any money because it was a bit too early on the market, but I have some great memories of people, being 70 and being able to see their grandchild in London for the first time. And then my most recent part of my career has been 7 years in the Department of Health, and then what is now about 9 years in my consultancy with Lyft. So that last chunk of time, so you can work out I'm fairly old by now, that last chunk of time has really allowed me to develop my leadership and team development practices. And now I have culminated that, I guess, in my keynote talks around the courage to create, whatever you want to create in your life, in your work, in your home, or your sporting career, whatever it might be. So all of those things, I guess it's a long answer, Leanne, but all of those things along the journey, when I look back, have each taught me something different and have allowed me to be a facilitator now that has a good wealth of diverse experience in different industries firsthand, and also has the ability to kind of understand other industries and other people that might be in my groups.
Well, you're not kidding about diverse industries and experience. That's absolutely huge. Tourism, legal, health. I guess the common thread in what you're talking about is you always bring up this concept of creating a safe environment, something that you're very passionate about. How do you create a safe environment in your workshops?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the best way to create a safe environment is be yourself. Don't go in as a facilitator trying to be something that you either think the group wants or that you think a facilitator should be. It's so important to have authenticity because you've got less than 3 minutes to build that trusting space with your group, especially if you haven't met them before. So I always say to people, be yourself, and obviously be professional. Think about how you dress, how you move, what your body language is conveying, and to create a trusting space where what you say actually is relevant to them, and you're not telling them, you're asking them the whole time. Because I guess one of the best pieces of advice I ever got from my mentor was the wisdom is in the room. So I think if you go in with that mindset that you are the facilitator, but you're not the teller of information. You don't know their industry. You don't know their challenges. You're there to help them explore all of that and find an answer. That will come out in the first 3 minutes if that's your mindset. That'll come out in the way you talk and the way you move, that you're genuinely there for them, not for you. You kind of got to put your ego in a box, leave it at the door, because you're there to help the group, not to show them how much knowledge you have.
Yeah, lovely. That's the first time I've ever heard the concept of the first 3 minutes. How did you find out about that? What is it about 3 minutes?
I think that's just my own thought from experience. You've got, when you're meeting people one-to-one, you've got about 30 seconds before they make a judgment of you, and I think there's some research, to back that up. But in the room, you've got that first kind of 3 minutes where you're saying, welcome to the day, this is what the day's about. People are sitting there either thinking, I wish I wasn't here, or what is this girl, does she actually know her stuff, all this kind of chatter in their head. And in that 3 minutes, if you can talk to them, maybe for me, I add a little bit of humour because that's my nature. If that's authentic for you, do that. But if it's a very serious meeting, then I get right down to why are we here and what are we going to achieve by the end of the day. And that helps release a bit of pressure, and people go, okay, right. So it's not just going to all be talk. We're actually going to get to an outcome. So that 3 minutes is your chance to build a quick bond that they believe in you. You still got to build on that over the rest of the day.
Okay, so you spoke about, for you, it's about being authentic, and your authentic self is quite humorous and you're fun. In your observation, what are other, I guess, critical skills for a facilitator?
I think there's a couple of ways you can look at this. So the IAF, International Association of Facilitators, have core competencies. There's 6 of them. So you can Google IAF core competencies and it'll come up. They're in a lot more detail. So for people that like the detail and maybe want to work towards a checklist, that would be good for them to have a look at. For me, I've kind of got 12 things that I always make sure I'm doing. So absolutely number 1 is be prepared. Like, you cannot go in the room not prepared. You need to know the industry, you need to have looked at their website, you need to know who's in the room, which is another part of that. And you don't need to know a lot about the people, but you need to know what level they're at, what are they, managers, leaders, frontline, that kind of thing. You need to build that inclusive, trusting, safe environment in that first 3 minutes. So you have to have a plan of how you do that. And know the content of the day. So if it's serious content around heavy strategic planning or downsizing or upsizing, whatever it is, then in that 3 minutes, talk about that. Name the elephant in the room if there is such a thing. If it's more of a fun day, then, encourage them and let them know they're going to have fun. Set some ground rules. You've absolutely got to do that because not everyone's coming for the same reasons. So how are we going to listen? What are our values? What are we going to stick to? And do that by asking them what the ground rules need to be. I see some facilitators telling the group what the ground rules are going to be. That's not going to stick. And I guess a couple of the other things out of the 12 I've got are you need to manage your time. Like, you absolutely need to know the time schedule of how this day is going to run. You can't get to an hour before the end time and you've still got 2 hours of material to do. You've got to, and for me that is my Achilles heel because I'm more creative than time bound. So I've got to be careful about that. For other facilitators, it's a bit easier. And you have to go in optimistic, adaptive, flexible. You've got your whole session plan. You've prepped the hell out of it, but things change and you've got to be able to let that go and go, okay, this is where the group needs to or wants to go. And to do that, you've got to have a Mary Poppins bag full of stuff.
What's in your Mary Poppins bag?
My partner is fascinated when I pack to go and facilitate because he says, you've been doing this for so many years and you still take too much stuff every time. You take stuff you don't use. And I say, yeah, because you don't know what's going to happen in the room. So I always take extra icebreakers in addition to the ones I've planned because I often get in the room and go, you know what, this room's a bit more high energy than I anticipated, or this room's a bit lower energy than I thought, or a bit more resistant than I expected, so I might use a different icebreaker. I always take more paper, more pens, more blue tack, more everything that you think you're going to need because the walls that you thought you could put paper up on, you can't, and you've got to be able to adapt if you want people up and moving around. I always take some other energizers, so I have a favourite go-to, which is a beach ball, and it has questions on permanent marker on the beach ball. And so you throw the beach ball around the room and people catch it, and wherever their hands land is a question, and they read the question and they give the answer. And it's a bit of fun and energy. So there are a few things that are in my Mary Poppins bag.
That is so cool. I know you're a bit of an inventor. Are you going to patent your beach ball?
Yeah, I actually have a secret desire to make a range of facilitator products because, not so secret now, I'm saying it on the podcast, but there is a lack of Mary Poppins bags, I guess, and when you're starting out, it takes a long time to gather these tools, and I've gathered them just from my own learning, I guess, but also watching other facilitators, and I'm always fascinated going, oh, what have they got in there, or, what's their go-to tool? So for first-time facilitators, ask away, when you're in a workshop, ask what they've got in their kit, and that's a good way to learn.
Yeah, I was actually thinking of a little segment on the show, a bit of an aside, was to ask facilitators what they do pack in their, I guess, training toolkit, and then just linking that as part of like a packing list on the website or something. Because I know it's right, you're so true. And even like the pens that facilitators use, I've seen those, is it Mr. Sketch, the fruit pens that people, I don't know, they seem to last forever, they smell good, they're colourful. I've seen that a lot around Brisbane.
Yeah, and you see people like Adam Fraser on his YouTubes. He's got those giant art line pens that are just huge. And so when he just wants to write one word, it's this big fat text and it looks fabulous. I've seen them in office work, so
Cool. We'll link to those in the show notes. You can do all these sort of things and prepare really well. And then sometime in the course of your workshop, someone can say something that can derail or you have a bit of an impact, which isn't so positive. How do you bring it back to that safe environment and creating a positive atmosphere when something like that happens?
Yeah, I think that is the number one nightmare of all facilitators. And I've watched some more experienced facilitators than me that have 40 years experience under their belt struggle with that. So I would just say to first-time facilitators, it's not easy for anyone to deal with when you've got one person in the group that is resisting or is being quite negative, or I've also had the ones that like to clown around, and so they never do the instructions that you are asking them to do, and then they go around disrupting everybody else. Or the person that constantly is on their mobile phone, even though the ground rules have been set that we'll put our phones in our bag. So you do get these kinds of behaviours. You also get the behaviours of people that have been sent to the workshop, and that's always challenging. They don't want to be there from the get-go. So a couple of things that I do is absolutely make sure you've got the ground rules in place first at the beginning of the day. And then if you've got those, you will need those, because say the ground rule says something like we listen without interrupting, and you've got someone that's always interrupting, then you need to say, look, I'm noticing that we aren't sticking to the ground rule we'd set earlier today about listening without interrupting. So we need to come back to that and be mindful of that and make sure that we are doing that to get the best out of the day. And then when it happens again, I would say, hey, Jake, when you're interrupting Sally like that, we're not sticking to the ground rules. You need to give it and actually have to name it. You don't want to, as a facilitator, especially in the larger group setting, you don't want to have to say, hey, Jake, that's not what's in line with the but if you've done all the other, you've done the ground rules, you've reminded the group as a whole, and then it's still happening, you're left with no option. The other thing I do that can be effective is go to the break, take a 5-minute stretch break and pull that person aside and say, look, Jake, when you're interrupting the group, when you're interrupting Sally, it's not allowing us to get the best out of the day. What's going on for you that, you feel the need to do that? Or what could I do differently as a facilitator to help you be heard? And have that conversation with him, and hopefully he's not just doing it because he loves, running amok. Hopefully that brings them around. On the flip side, out of, the last 10 years of facilitating, I've probably only had that happen twice, where it's been that bad that I've had to either name it in the group or I've had to pull the person aside. So, first-time facilitators, don't panic. It's not going to happen every group.
Yeah, that's right. I find it interesting that you said, facilitators are 40 years still experienced and can sometimes trip and stumble. A lot of preparations involved in a workshop. It can be stressful. So why do you enjoy training other people?
I love it because I like to take complex stuff and make it simple and have people go, oh, yeah, that makes sense, and now we could do that. And I like creating that energy that you can create as a facilitator and move people from, I don't think I can do this, or this is so hard and complex, or we don't know what to do next, to the end of the day or the end of the 2 hours going, oh, wow, we've got a solution. I never expected that. Or we've got an idea of how to move forwards. Or if it's team building, they come in and they're quite separate and there's a few people that don't like each other and they're thinking the day's going to be rubbish, and then they come out the other end going, oh, that was really actually quite productive, or now I understand so much better what we need to do next. So I do like, and that's probably why my consultancy is called Lift. I like that energy. I also like transferable learning. I like people to get outcomes that they can use. But I also think back to when I was a little kid, and I've got 3 sisters, and we always played schools in our school holidays. We never wanted to be at school, but in our school holidays we played schools. And I was always the teacher. I always wanted to be the one writing on the board. So I think, you have maybe a natural path towards it as well.
Reading your bio, you're accredited in a number of profiling tools, including DISC, MBTI and Belbin. And I know, speaking to different facilitators, they all have the one that they really like the most. So what's your favourite tool and why?
Yeah, I love Belbin because it is a team-based profile. So Myers-Briggs is personality, so I use that a lot in one-to-one coaching and leadership development, and it tells you introvert, extrovert, how you think and process information. I like the DISC because it's simpler, and for some clients it's cheaper as well. There's a price factor. Myers-Briggs has 160 plus questions. DISC has only got about 30, and Belbin has 10. So 10's very quick to do. It's the cost competitive, but mostly it's about team roles. So Belbin's the only one that really does team roles, and so it's not your personality, it's about your behaviours in a team. And whether you're leading a team or working in a team, at some point you need to know your team role. And it's very appreciative inquiry based, so it's very much around your strengths and what you do well and what you bring to the team. So I find it's a very non-threatening profile to use. I've been using it since 2003. I'm probably the most experienced person in WA and probably in the top 5 in Australia, because I've done about 1,500 profiles, and it just freaks me out every time how accurate it is. Even now, after doing so many profiles, people sit in front of me and go, wow, I answered 10 questions and this is like really relevant to me in a team. Yeah. So, and it fits in as a facilitator well, because you are working the team. So knowing their profiles means you know who's in the room from a behavioural point of view.
Okay, cool. And does your Belbin profile change depending on the team or work environment you're in, or does it stay consistent?
It doesn't. I guess I can only answer from my experience. It doesn't really change over time unless you change your job significantly. So I remember probably about 8 years ago, I had a nurse manager, and his Belbin profile strength was around shaping, driving change, being quite dynamic and energetic. That's what he did well. And then he changed jobs for a 3-month period and had to do an audit on the health service, which was all about data and measurement. And interestingly, in that same period, he did his Belbin again because he joined another team. And his Belbin top score was no longer this shaper, driver, dynamic one. It was around completer, finisher, which is all around deadlines and quantity and measurement. And it's not his natural preference, and the 3 months just exhausted him because it's not his natural. But he definitely, I actually had proof, scientific, I guess, proof that it does change if you change your job significantly. He then went back to his normal job and was much happier. So I think that's, from my experience, the only time it does change. And often if you're, going to have a baby or you've just had a major life shift, then your Belbin will go a little bit more even spread because you're having to use a lot of different skills in those transition times. But generally, the top 3 scores might shift place, 1, 2 and 3, but they stay as your top 3.
Yeah, cool. You've got a bit of creativity in you, Cherelle, and I'd love to hear, I only heard about this recently, you developed a new keynote. Is it a workshop or a speech?
That's a good question. It's called an interactive keynote because I didn't want to become a keynote speaker that just stands on the stage and talks at people. So it's a combo.
Yeah, I love the title, The Courage to Create. So can you tell us what it's about?
Yeah, so it's got 3 elements, and it's really kind of bringing together my inventive part of my life, which is Tricky Treats, and that's an automatic toy and treat dispenser for dogs, and I've been working on that for about 5 years. Brings that and my Lift consultancy, training and facilitating together in a space where I talk about the importance of diverse thinking. Agile thinking is all the rage at the moment. People are talking about it a lot. But really what it means is getting people in the room and appreciating their diversity. And so the interactive keynote for the Courage to Create has a first part around diverse thinking and how important it is that we appreciate each other's thought. We do an activity around that so people look at the same thing and then see it quite differently. The second part of it is a bit more serious. We talk about failure, and Dana and Coppersmith have written a great book called The Other F Word, and it's on failure, and they have a great quote in there that says, failure is the asset in your company that you've already paid for. And so if you've already paid for it, why wouldn't you examine it and use it? And we tend to not do that. We tend to push it to the side because we're embarrassed and then move on with the next idea. So the second part of the interactive keynote talks about failure and how we manage that, and obviously how we manage the emotions around that, which are going to be embarrassment and possibly shame, and how we rise up from that. So we do an activity that's fun in that quite serious bit of the keynote to talk about how we bounce back from failure. And then we finish off with some Belbin team roles, which is, are you a task person, or are you a thinking person, or are you a harmony people person? And people get to stand in their area and look at the other different people in the room and how similar or different we are. And I have a bit of fun talking to them about, how you see the world differently to the other people across the other side of the room.
Oh, wow. So how did you actually decide to put this together and then also make the decision on what you include and what, I guess, the more important question is what you don't include?
Yeah, hours and hours of pulling my hair out. It's really hard to distill it down, especially, I'm looking at 25 years of knowledge. How do I get that into a 1-hour keynote that's fun, that's not boring death by PowerPoint? So it took a long time. I'd say it took over 2 weeks of intensive thinking, and also other people giving me their feedback. So people that could then I shared my keynote with them, and they'd go, oh, yeah, that doesn't really make sense, or I got a bit bored there. And so really asking people to give you feedback has been important, and they see different parts of the keynote as important to them. So, I'm putting it out there for other people, not for me. So I've done that to refine it all the time. I guess the other thing that drove me to those 3 areas are the 3 areas that my clients use over and over again. So they diversity of views, knowing your team profile, strengths, and knowing how to navigate failure seem to be the common things over the last 5 years that have come up more and more. And certainly in my business with Tricky Treats and having an invention, having a crazy idea and then taking it to commercial reality, they're the 3 things that, I've really encountered the most as well.
Yeah. Having that side hustle, sounds like you got a couple different side hustles going. How are you managing to juggle all of them but still deliver for your clients?
A lot of balls fall on the floor regularly, but I'm quite good at scooping them up. Yes. Well, you don't sleep. Sleep's a bit of a waste of time. Although I watched a program last night that said sleep is essential for reconfirming our memories and creating the myelin around our brain matter. So I better get some more sleep. But I guess time management is always an issue. Probably the simplest answer is to segment my day. So I try and segment, morning I'm doing inventive work, or I'm talking to potential buyers and things like that. The afternoon I'm working on my keynote for a client next week. It does come down to planning. I do have a virtual assistant who helps me and keeps me on track and manages my diary, and I confess to her once a week all the things I haven't done that I need to now do for next week. So, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. And you mentioned a few resources and really great, videos to watch, including the Adam Fraser one. Are there any other books or resources that you would recommend to first-time facilitators?
I would definitely say find a mentor, because that's probably where I've learnt the most than from books. And I'm going to say something that, other people might have a completely different opinion on, but there's not a lot of great books out there on facilitation. So I would read some stuff around group dynamics. There's lots of good books on group dynamics, and the more you understand group dynamics, the better you are as a facilitator. So ones that anything written by, I think his name's Roger Schwartz. Roger Schwartz, he's written Smart Leaders, Smart Teams, and Patrick Lencioni, or Lencioni if you're more Italian, has written great books on team development and the 5 functions or dysfunctions of a team. As far as pure facilitation books go, Dale Hunter has written a couple, The Art of Facilitation and The Zen of Groups. So I found parts of those books quite good. And there's a Perth girl called Ivona Polovi. I always mispronounce her surname. Sorry, Ivona. And she's written Ordinary Meetings Don't Interest Me That Much. And her book is basically a selection of other facilitators, very experienced facilitators, sharing their thoughts and of course, her journey as well. So they'd be my first off thoughts, yeah.
Awesome. And finally, I just want to talk a bit about your invention, Tricky Treats. If you'd like to share a bit more about your journey with that with the audience, and also just explain Have there been any, in terms of crossover in the skills that you've learnt by building up this business and an invention, that you've brought into the world of facilitation? Are there any sort of parallels?
Yeah, there are huge parallels that I didn't anticipate. I thought I had two separate businesses that had nothing in common with each other. And particularly now I'm doing my keynote on the courage to create. It's so obvious that the universe has been leading me in this path. So I can stand up and talk with authenticity about the courage to create, like needing to find the courage. There are certainly days where I want to pull the doona over my head and it's just all, a bit hard. I think too that the natural journey of an invention requires you to fail quite a lot, and you have to get good at bouncing not just back but forwards from the failure. And I can, talk quite, emotionally in a good way about what that means and what that means to put yourself out there and have people say, oh, that's a rubbish idea or that's a good idea or whatever it might be. I think too that my facilitation skills have helped me in my invention business, because often I'm sitting in a room talking to business people, retailers. I don't know anything about their world, but I have good questions. Being a facilitator gives you good, powerful questions that you can ask to learn more. So that's kind of fed backwards into Tricky Treats. I think overall too, I talk a lot about agility in my facilitation work, and I want my teams in the room to be agile. So really understanding what that means and being able to not hold on to a thought or an idea so tightly that you're not able to listen to someone else's view is key.
Cherelle, I'm so excited for you. We were talking about the idea of Tricky Treats when it was in its infancy in Broome a few years ago. I remember at the Mangrove Hotel you told me about your idea, and I was instantly excited because I thought of my two dogs at home getting bored, digging up the garden. So it's really exciting to hear how you've progressed and how it's benefited, both the invention itself plus your facilitation as well. Finally, where can people find you?
I guess that's a good question because I'm just about to update the website, but our website is liftps.com, and probably they could just send me an email. I'm happy to respond to any questions or support any of those new facilitators that might be listening. So Cherelle, which is a tricky name, Cherelle, Cherelle at liftps.com. They could reach me there.
Awesome, and we'll link to that in the show notes as well. I love hearing all of your updates every couple of months about the business. So well done, and thanks again for sharing your advice for first-time facilitators.
Oh, good. I hope it was helpful. It's been my pleasure to work with you again. Who knew our lives would cross in this way?
I know, who knew? Thanks again, Cherelle.